Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if the way we talk to babies actually changes how they process language? Well, this new study dives into just that, looking at the tiny but mighty differences between baby talk and regular grown-up talk. So, what is the big mystery here? Scientists have known for a long time that when grown-ups talk to babies, they change their voice. It is often higher-pitched, slower, and the vowels sound more distinct. But the burning question is why? Is this just how some people express affection? Or does it serve a specific purpose for helping babies learn language? This study wanted to see if these baby talk differences, especially things like vowel clarity and pitch, happen more in important parts of a sentence, like stressed syllables or the end of a sentence. They also wondered if this changes as the baby gets older. Think about it like this. When we talk, we don't just say words, we put emphasis on certain words or syllables, and we change our tone. This is called prosody. It's like the music of language. Scientists have noticed that baby talk, or infant-directed speech as they call it, has a lot of this music turned up. It is often higher-pitched, slower, and the vowels are more open or clearer sounding, but some researchers thought maybe these baby talk features aren't something parents are trying to do specifically for babies. Maybe it's just a side effect of talking in shorter sentences at a slower pace, often putting important words at the end of sentences. You know, like when you really want someone to grasp something important, you might say it slower and emphasize it at the end. If that's true, then the differences between baby talk and adult talk might show up more in those important parts of sentences. Or maybe, just maybe, parents are specifically highlighting these sounds to help babies pick out words and learn language skills. This study is a deep dive into that possibility, looking at whether the baby talk effect is amplified in specific linguistic spots. So how did they actually test this? They gathered 20 mothers, 10 who had 4-month-old babies and 10 who had 11-month-old babies. The reason for these two age groups is that babies develop differently in their first year, and the researchers wanted to see if age mattered. Each mother did two things. First, they interacted with their own baby, talking about various objects. This was the baby talk, or infant-directed speech part. Then, separately, they talked to an experimenter and a student about the same objects using regular adult-directed speech. They recorded all of this. The key was that they focused on specific types of words, bisyllabic words that follow a stressed-unstressed pattern like teddy or pencil. They did this because these words have clearly distinct stressed and unstressed syllables, and they wanted to compare the sounds in those stressed and unstressed parts. After recording, they used special software to analyze the sounds. They identified particular vowels within the stressed and unstressed syllables of those target words. They measured three main things for each vowel: its duration, how long it lasted, its fundamental frequency, which is related to pitch, and something called vowel peripherality. Vowel peripherality sounds fancy, but it is basically a measure of how far apart the vowel sounds are in the mouth sound space. Think of it like having very distinct colors versus colors that are very similar. More peripheral vowels are like more distinct colors, which can make them easier to hear and distinguish. They also noted whether the word was in the middle of a sentence or at the end. Now came the tricky part, making sense of all that data. They used some complex statistical tools, including something called mixed effects models. Don't worry too much about the details, but just know these are powerful ways to analyze data where you have multiple factors, like register, baby talk, vs adult talk, position, middle vs end of sentence, and age group. They also used other methods like checking effect sizes and binomial distributions to make sure their findings were robust. The main goal was to see if the differences between baby talk and adult talk were significant, and if they changed depending on whether the vowel was stressed, unstressed, or at the end of an utterance. Alright, let's get to the juicy findings. They looked at duration, pitch, and vowel peripherality. First, duration. Interestingly, they found no significant difference in vowel duration between baby talk and adult talk for either stressed or unstressed syllables. This actually goes against some earlier studies that found longer vowel durations in baby talk. The researchers suggest that their more controlled method might have ironed out some of the inconsistencies found in previous research. So, babies aren't necessarily getting words that are drawn out longer, at least not in this study. Next, pitch. This is where things got more interesting. For stressed syllables, they found a clear difference. Vowels in stressed syllables were significantly higher pitched in baby talk compared to adult talk. This effect was large and consistent across their analyses. For unstressed syllables, the pitch difference was still there, but it was weaker and not as stable across all the talkers. This suggests that while pitch generally goes up in baby talk, it is especially noticeable in the emphasized parts of words. And what about vowel clarity, that vowel peripherality measure? For stressed syllables, they saw a trend towards greater peripherality in baby talk, but it wasn't a strong or consistent effect across all participants. For unstressed syllables, however, they found a more significant result. Unstressed vowels were more peripheral in baby talk than in adult talk. This means the vowels in unstressed syllables were clearer and more distinct in baby talk. This is a pretty important finding, as it suggests that even the less emphasized parts of words in baby talk are made more distinct. They also looked at whether these differences were more pronounced at the end of sentences. You might expect babies to get more emphasis at the end of an utterance. However, the study found no significant interaction between register and utterance position. This means that the differences they saw in pitch and vowel clarity weren't specifically boosted just because a word was at the end of a sentence. The effects were pretty consistent whether the word was in the middle or at the end. So, what does all of this mean? The study tried to answer if the typical differences seen in baby talk are just a side effect of talking slower and in shorter sentences, or if parents are actively shaping the sounds to help babies learn. They found that while vowel duration didn't differ much, pitch was higher in baby talk, especially in stressed syllables. And importantly, vowels in unstressed syllables were clearer in baby talk. Crucially, these differences didn't seem to depend on whether the word was at the end of the sentence or not. This suggests that the reductionist hypothesis that all baby talk differences are just a byproduct of shorter, slower speech isn't fully supported. Another key question was whether these effects change with the baby's age. They compared speech to 4-month-olds and 11-month-olds and found that, unexpectedly, there were no significant differences based on infant age. This means that the way mothers spoke to 4-month-olds, looking for prosodic cues, was similar to how they spoke to 11-month-olds who are more advanced language learners. The researchers speculate that perhaps the mothers in this study didn't perceive a big difference in their baby's learning needs at these two early stages, or that they used a generally consistent strategy. Now, like all studies, this one has some limitations. For instance, they couldn't directly compare stressed and unstressed syllables within the same analysis because the vowel sounds themselves were different. They also note that things like how much attention a parent is giving to a word focus and how many times a word is repeated, repetition weren't fully controlled for, although they did analyze repetition and found more of it in IDs. And they used only words with a stressed-unstressed pattern. So they can't say for sure if other word patterns have the same effects. To sum up, this study found that infant-directed speech really does have distinct acoustic properties compared to adult-directed speech. Specifically, we see higher pitch, particularly in stressed syllables, and clearer vowel sounds even in unstressed syllables. However, these differences weren't amplified at the end of sentences, nor did they seem to change, based on the infant's age between 4 and 11 months. This suggests that parents are indeed modifying their speech for infants, perhaps to make sounds more prominent, but the exact reasons and how it targets specific developmental stages still need more exploration. What is fascinating is that even the less important unstressed vowels are made more distinct in baby talk. So, what is my take on this? I think this research is super important because it gets us closer to understanding why baby talk even exists. The fact that unstressed vowels are more distinct in baby talk is really interesting. It implies that parents might be making all the sounds more salient, not just the ones they're trying to emphasize with stress. This could be a way to help babies tune into the speech stream and better learn the basic building blocks of their language. The lack of age-specific differences was a bit surprising, but it could mean that there is a general overarching strategy for talking to very young infants. And maybe more nuanced differences emerge as babies get older and start actively producing words. The study's strength lies in its rigorous statistical analysis and its focus on specific linguistic features like stress and position. However, the limited age range and the focus on only one type of word pattern mean we can't draw sweeping conclusions. Future research could definitely look at older babies, different kinds of words, and maybe even ask parents what they think they're doing when they talk to their babies. Do they consciously try to make sounds clearer, or is it just an instinct? It would also be cool to see if babies actually respond differently to these clearer sounds. Ultimately, this study adds a piece to the puzzle of how parents facilitate language learning. It tells us that the way we talk to babies probably isn't random. There appears to be a consistent effort to make the speech input clearer and more engaging, even if the precise mechanisms and developmental progression require further investigation. That's all for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this breakdown helpful, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment below with your thoughts on baby talk, and don't forget to subscribe for more Science Simplified. See you next time.